Hi, everybody. This is Rosemary Jenks from Numbers USA. I want to welcome you to our call tonight. We are very grateful to have three amazing senators who are going to participate in this call. And I want to tell you all, first of all, that if you have questions or comments, questions that you want to ask, you need to dial *3, and you will be put into a queue with your question, and we will address as many of those as we can on the call. And then I want to introduce our first distinguished speaker, Senator David Vitter from Louisiana. Senator Vitter was one of the primary leaders in the fight against amnesty in 2007, and he has stepped up to the plate to protect America from this amnesty as well. So, Senator Vitter, we welcome you.
Thanks very much, Rosemary. Thank you very, very much for the kind words. Even more importantly, thanks for all of Numbers USA's work and partnership on this critical issue, fighting amnesty and fighting bad immigration policy. Really want to underscore to everybody on the line that this is the critical week in the United States Senate. If you care about this issue, if you don't want a big amnesty, which I believe would be horribly counterproductive to the country, put us even further back in solving the immigration problem, this is the week. This is the week you need to make your voices heard. And I know Rosemary will have contact information for the entire U.S. Senate, but this is the critical week. We just had a vote on a so-called border security amendment on cloture tonight. That passed, and I'm concerned about that, quite frankly, because I don't think this amendment is really designed to bill. I think it's designed to pass the bill. And I want to fix the bill. I want to fix the problem, not just go through a political exercise, win political points. So I don't want an amendment to pass the bill. I want an amendment to fix the bill, and I think this amendment was the former, not the latter. It was really a fig leaf designed to make some people feel good or to give them talking points about border security, but it still didn't fix two big problems with the bill. Number one, under the bill, including under this amendment, a huge amnesty happens pretty much immediately on the front end, and only after that do we talk about border security, and that may or may not ever happen. Well, we've tried that model in the past. It doesn't work, and we've seen many times in the past, particularly in 1986, that immigration bill, that, of course, the amnesty kicks in. It's effective immediately, but the security and the enforcement never fully materializes. The second big problem with this amendment is that it doesn't measure real enforcement or effectiveness. The only measure it has is spending money. Well, the federal government is very good at spending money, and the Obama administration is the best administration ever at spending money. So that's not a problem. They'll pass that test, but there is no measure in the bill to demand real enforcement and results, actual slowdown of crossings at the border, an actual situation where people cannot get work if they're in the country illegally. So those are the two fatal flaws with the bill and with this so-called Corker-Hoven amendment, in my opinion. With that, Rosemary, I'd love to hear from folks, comments, and questions in the time I have before you get to your other Senate guests.
Well, I will tell you, Senator, we have a question from Thomas Lena from Florida, who is asking, have all of these senators who voted yes on cloture tonight forgotten that they work for the American people? Do they not understand that Americans want the fence built before amnesty? How would you respond to whether or not senators really are paying attention to their constituents?
Yeah, Thomas, I agree with you, and certainly all across Louisiana, which I represent, when I go across Louisiana, that's what I hear all the time. National polls also show that that's what American voters want nationally. They're open to a lot of things down the line if we have real enforcement first, if we control the border and the workplace first, not just promise it because it's been promised 10 times over, but do it, see it, feel it, verify it, measure it. If we make sure we have that enforcement first, trust but verify.
And Senator, you have done a lot of work trying to get the biometric entry and exit system put into place. Why is that important?
Well, we can start with 9/11. This biometric entry-exit system is designed to track visas into the country and to guard against visa overstays. A big part of our immigration problem, particularly on the terrorist side, is visa overstays. People actually enter the country legally because they have a proper visa, but they completely disregard how long they're supposed to be here and stay forever. And there's essentially no effective follow-up to go after those visa overstays. Now, I said 9/11 because all of the 9/11 terrorists were visa overstays. For that reason, the 9/11 Commission said one of the critical things we have to do is have this solid entry-exit system to track visas into the country and to throw up a red flag when they have not left in time so we can go after them. And we need that at every significant seaport, land port, and airport. I had an amendment to do just that on this bill, and it was defeated. So I think that suggests that the folks in charge of this bill really aren't truly serious about enforcement, because that U.S. visit system, it's called, the entry-exit system to catch visa overstays, is a very important topic.
Senator, we next have a question from Steve Rollin, who, and I think this is something you're very familiar with, he has heard about the massive IRS refund checks going to illegal aliens. And will that be part of this debate? Is there any way to get that addressed in this bill or to use it to defeat the bill?
Yeah, Steve, great question. It is part of the debate. I've made it part of the debate. Other conservatives have made it part of the debate. Unfortunately, fixing it is not part of the bill. And so there is still this huge incentive for illegals, reward essentially to illegals through the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. Now, most people hear tax credit and they think, oh, you have to be in the country legally and you have to pay taxes to maybe get some back. Well, that's not how these tax credits work. These are what's called refundable tax credits, which means that in many, many cases, the majority of cases, are actually checks from the government sent. So essentially a check from the government akin to a welfare check. So it's not a tax break. It's really a government spending program. And lots of illegal folks get these checks from the taxpayer now, completely against the law. We had an opportunity to fix it in this bill, to enforce against that, to stop that incentive for more illegals to come in, to stop that magnet attracting more illegal crossings. And the proponents of the bill wouldn't allow that, wouldn't fix that.
Thank you, Senator. And we also have a question here from John in Virginia, who is asking, is there any way that Republicans can rally to try to delay this bill beyond the 4th of July break in order to build up grassroots efforts against the bill? And do Republicans who support the bill understand how much damage this will do to the party?
Two great questions, John. Unfortunately, I don't think we can push this beyond this week. Harry Reid now has the bill procedurally where he wants it, and he can demand essentially that it be wrapped up this week, given the current posture of the bill. So now is the time. This is the critical time to call in, email, flood your U.S. Senator's lines with calls, flood his computer with emails. Now, this week is the time. Regarding the second question, I think Republicans supporting this bill have the substance wrong, and I also think they have the politics wrong. And I think they're primarily motivated by politics. Somehow they think this is a good move politically. I think it's going to be just the opposite, particularly when it becomes clear to the American people that we haven't fixed anything and we still have this huge illegal flow.
And the last question for the moment, anyway, is from Ophelia from Florida, who is asking, why isn't mandatory E-Verify enough? Why can't we just do mandatory E-Verify to take away the jobs magnet and without having the whole amnesty?
Well, Ophelia, I agree with you, and I agree that's a critical area that we need to fix. You know, all of the attention and debate, many times it seems, is about the border. But the workplace is just as important, maybe more important, because if we really had a full mandatory universal E-Verify system that worked, where only folks in the country legally, citizens or others in the country legally, could get jobs, then the flow across the border would virtually stop. We'd still need border security for protect against terrorism and drug traffickers and the like, but the huge majority of the flow, over 99%, would stop if we fix that. So I agree with you. It's a key area that we need to focus on. I'm focused on trying to fix that. I don't think this bill fixes that adequately at all. And of course, the real key flaw, in my opinion, is that it grants this huge amnesty first and then promises enforcement.
Well,
Jeff
Senator
Sessions joining here.
Hi, Senator Sessions. And Senator Vitter, I know you have something else on your schedule for right now, and I want to thank you very much on behalf of all of our callers and all the grassroots for everything you have done in this effort.
Thanks to all of you all at Numbers USA. You've done a super job, and I know I'm leaving it in good hands as I turn it over to Jeff Sessions.
Thank you very much, Senator Vitter. And actually, Senator Sessions, if you don't mind, I think we've also got Senator Cruz on the line, and I think that he has something he's got to get to at 7:30, so if we could let him jump in here. Are you with us, Senator Cruz?
I am.
I agree. Ted was ahead of me. I'm just glad to listen.
Thank
Ted
you so much,
did great
Senator.
today. I want to just express, Ted, my appreciation for you and David for your superb remarks on the floor today.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff.
So everyone listening, this is Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, who has been really, I think, leading a movement in the Senate to bring transparency and accountability back to Congress, which would be a brand new thing for a lot of people. So, Senator Cruz, go ahead.
Well, good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us. I appreciate your active engagement, and actually the word just referenced there, accountability, I think is critical. Because at the end of the day, all 100 senators, all 435 members of the House work for the American people. And there is nothing more potent than grassroots activists when we are engaged. What I'd like to say briefly is three things. Number one, this bill is a mess. It repeats the same mistakes that Congress made in 1986. In 1986, Congress came to the American people and said, we'll offer you a deal. We will grant amnesty to some 3 million people who are here illegally. And we'll do so in exchange for securing the borders, for permanently fixing the problem. What Congress told the American people is, once we do that, illegal immigration will go away. We will solve this problem. The American people took that exchange. And what happened, sadly and predictably, was the amnesty occurred and the borders never got secured. The promised enforcement never happened, and now, some 3 decades later, we're back again having the same conversation, except instead of 3 million people here illegally, it's now roughly 11 million. And this Gang of 8 bill has the exact same deal that was present in 1986. It grants immediate legalization, and it promises border security maybe someday in the future. In my view, I don't think the American people are foolish enough to accept that deal a second time. We have seen demonstrated as a factual matter, as a practical matter, it does not work. I think there's huge bipartisan agreement among the American people, both Republican and Democrat, that we have a broken immigration system, that we need to finally get serious about securing the borders, about stopping illegal immigration, and that we need to improve and streamline our legal immigration system to make it work well, to remain a nation that doesn't simply welcome but that celebrates legal immigrants. In my view, that's the path for addressing this, and this bill doesn't do that. This bill, if it is passed into law, will make the existing problems worse. This bill, if it's passed into law, will encourage future illegal immigration, will encourage future human tragedies as women and children entrust themselves to coyotes, to traffickers, they're sexually assaulted, they're left to die in the desert. This is not a humane system. And if this bill passes, we can know with absolute certainty that in 10 or 20 or 30 years, we'll be back here having the exact same debate yet again, except instead of 11 million people here illegally, it would be 20 million or 30 million and decades more of tragedy. This bill is a bill that does not work, does not solve the problem, and in my view is contrary to the strong views of the American people. A second point I wanted to make to everyone, that there is one particular aspect of this bill that I think is uniquely pernicious, and I think the more the American people understand it and realize how it operates, the more opposed they will be to this bill. And that is how the Gang of Eight bill operates in tandem with Obamacare. Because the way it is written, this bill amounts to de facto affirmative action for those who are here illegally. Let's suppose you are a small business owner that owns a business with, say, 100 employees, and you are contemplating hiring 5 new employees. The Gang of Eight bill exempts illegal immigrants who would get what's called RPI status from Obamacare. If you as a small business owner wanted to hire a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident, you would either have to provide full-fledged health insurance for that employee, or you would face what could be a $3,000 fine per employee, which when you factor in the tax treatment works out to about $5,000 per employee. In effect, that means that it is roughly $5,000 more for you to hire a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident than it is for you to hire someone who is here illegally. And that's the effect of this proposal, is every U.S. citizen suddenly has an Obamacare penalty if he or she gets hired. Every legal permanent resident, every legal immigrant who waited in line for years suddenly has an Obamacare penalty if he or she gets hired. And the only people exempted from the Obamacare penalty are those who are here illegally. Now, the proponents of this bill have belittled this as a small consequence. But if you're running a small business, let's suppose you're hiring 5 new employees, the difference is that's $25,000 every year between hiring 5 people who are here illegally who get these RPI permits versus hiring U.S. citizens or hiring legal immigrants. If you think about it even more starkly, if you're running a small business, the incentive, if you were to fire all 100 of your employees who were U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents and instead hire only those who are here illegally with RPI permits, you would save $500,000 a year. Now, for a small business, that's real dollars, and it makes no sense. And what is striking is the proponents of this bill have not even attempted to defend this preference in hiring for those who are here illegally, because in my view, it is indefensible. It does not make sense to treat those who are here illegally better than U.S. citizens and better than legal immigrants who follow the rules. And toward that end, I've introduced an amendment that would defund Obamacare at a minimum until there were no remaining RPI individuals. Now, that amendment has not been allowed to come up for a vote on the floor of the Senate, and it may well not be brought up, but I think this argument is an important one for people to understand because it really is indefensible on the substance. The final point I wanted to make to everyone is this week is critical. I want to underscore what David Vitter said just a minute ago. I mean, this week is ground zero. It is Harry Reid's intention to vote this bill out by the end of the week, and he right now intends to use every bit of muscle he can to make that happen. I would make the only thing that has the potential to stop that is the men and women on this call. The only thing that has the potential to stop that are the grassroots of America rising up and saying, no, we don't want to go down this path again. We don't want to repeat the steps of 1986. We want to secure the border first before legalization. And so what I would encourage each of you to do this week is the critical battle, is two things. Number one, we have launched a national petition at tedcruz.org of tens of thousands of Americans all over the country who have signed up on this petition and have said, we want security first. Secondly, and we have had over 100,000 people in just a week sign this petition nationally. Secondly, no time is it more important than right now for you and your friends and family and everyone you know to pick up the phone and call your U.S. Senator, call your U.S. House member. Get online and email your U.S. Senator, email your U.S. House member. You know, I've had folks ask, do calls to the Senate make a difference? And I think a lot of people are skeptical that they do. I can tell you nothing gets the attention of elected representatives more than having their constituents light up their phones. Every one of us gets a report, typically on a daily basis, of what phone calls came in, what emails came in. And the surest thing to get the attention of, number one, Republicans who are thinking about voting for this bill, and I'll tell you, there are as many as 20 Republicans who are on the fence contemplating voting for this bill. Nothing will get their attention more than hearing from thousands of their constituents this week. And number two, from red state Democrats, from Democrats who go home and campaign and tell their constituents they're conservatives, nothing will get their attention more than hearing from their constituents. And so now is the time to reach out to the members of the Senate, and now is also the time to reach out to the House, because even if Harry Reid is able to push this through the Senate, at the end of the day, the House is going to have the final say on whether this passes or not. And the more House members hear from their constituents, from the American people, the more likely we are to ensure that any immigration legislation that passes fixes the problem. It secures the border first, and it doesn't repeat the mistakes that we made in 1986.
Senator, thank you very much for that. And I want to remind everyone, if you have a question you want to ask, dial *3, and you'll get into a queue to ask your question. And Senator, we have a challenge from Bonnie in California, who is actually putting this challenge to her own two senators from California, but it's kind of a fun challenge. She's asking, how much of these senators' personal fortunes would they be willing to put on the line, promising the American people that this bill will solve the problem? How many of those senators supporting the bill do you think would be willing to put their own reputation, their own stake on this bill solving the problem?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I think the answer would be that you wouldn't find a senator willing to put a plumb nickel on the line. You know, we did see back in 1986 a number of senators stand on the floor of the Senate and say, this will solve the problem. This will make illegal immigration go away. I was on the floor of the Senate just a few days ago where Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, said the same thing, that when this bill passes, illegal immigration will be a thing of the past. And it was striking as he said that it was echoes of 1986. And the truth of the matter is, I don't think any of the proponents of this legislation believe it will solve the problem. What this is all about, I believe, was made perfectly clear in the Judiciary Committee markup, when I introduced a number of amendments designed to actually fix the problem, to solve this situation, one of which was an amendment, a very simple amendment, that simply eliminated the pathway to citizenship. In my view, the pathway to citizenship is the most contentious, divisive element of this bill, and so the amendment I introduced would just eliminate that. And Senator Schumer's response, in my view, was very, very revealing. He said, if there is no citizenship, there can be no reform. And I thought that was the clarifying moment of the entire debate, because he made perfectly explicit, and I thanked him for his candor at the hearing, that he has one overarching partisan political objective, and that is a path to citizenship, and that everything else is unimportant compared to that political objective. If he cannot get 100% of his political objective, he's willing to do nothing to secure the borders. He's willing to do nothing to improve illegal immigration. He's willing to do nothing for the 11 million people who are here illegally unless he gets 100% of his partisan political objective. I thought that was a clarifying moment, but it also makes clear that all of the talk about border security, I believe the proponents know full well these provisions won't solve the problem, and in fact, they don't even expect many of them will be implemented. But this is all about focusing on their overarching partisan political objective.
Senator Robert from Ohio wants to thank you for making such a big impact on Rush Limbaugh, and he's hoping that perhaps other like-minded senators might do the same, and you might be able to encourage them to do that.
Well, Robert, thank you for that encouragement. I appreciate that. There have been a number of leaders in the Senate, including my friends Jeff Sessions and David Vitter, both on this call, and Mike Lee and others who have been standing up and trying to effectively highlight the problems here. But let me be perfectly candid. At the end of the day, none of us have the ability to prevent this from happening. No U.S. senator is going to have the ability to stand in the way from this being forced into law unless the American people stand up and speak. At the end of the day, political power is not found in any one U.S. senator or even a handful of U.S. senators. The locus of political power, real authority, is with we the people, is with the American people. And, you know, I got to tell you, thinking back to a recent battle we had in the Senate, which was the battle over Second Amendment rights, where there was huge momentum behind President Obama's efforts to undermine the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. And what transformed that debate was millions of Americans getting engaged, picking up the phone, reaching out to their senators and saying, no, do not undermine our constitutional rights. Go after violent criminals, but protect our rights. And you saw senator after senator after senator who was prepared to go along with President Obama suddenly switch and turn around. The same thing is true here. The only way we turn this around is if the men and women on this call and thousands of others reach out and demand of our elected officials that they actually represent us, that they be accountable to the American people, and they not give in to the same closed-door deals and mistakes that have characterized Washington politicians for a long, long time.
Senator, I know you're going to have to leave us in a second, but one last question that we've actually got several people asking this. How much of the feedback that your Senate offices are getting has been positive for the bill versus negative?
Well, I'll tell you, in my office at least, and I can't speak for the other senators, but in my office it has been overwhelmingly off the charts opposed to the bill. I mean, our phones have been lighting up with Americans saying, please stop this bill, please don't grant legalization first, and with border security, possibly, maybe, sometime in the future. As I analogized it today on the floor of the Senate, it's very much like that character from Popeye, Wimpy, who said, you know, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. The approach of this bill is, you know, we'll gladly secure the border Tuesday for legalization today. That is an approach that doesn't work. And I have to tell you, at least in our office, it has been off the charts, the view of the American people. They don't want to make the same mistakes we made before. And what we've got to make sure is that the other senators, particularly the Republican senators who are on the fence, who are agonizing about what to do, and the red state Democrats who are doing the same, that they hear from their constituents and that they're held accountable. And I'm grateful to all of you for your commitment to do exactly that.
Thank you so very much, Senator. Thank you for all that you do and the battles you wage, and we hope you will keep battling them on our behalf.
You have my word for it. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you, sir. And I want to remind everyone now that if you have a question, dial *3 and you'll be put into the queue to ask your question. And our next distinguished guest has been really, I think, leading this battle on this bill. And just as he led the battle against the failed 2007 amnesty, if you have turned on C-SPAN over the last couple of weeks, you have seen his face and heard his voice. Senator Jeff Sessions from Alabama, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for what you do, because without it, we would not have the ability to stop the train that's rolling. I think it's still a possibility. We got a lot of work to do. The situation is grim, but our phones are ringing off the hook 20-1 against this legislation. So I think after a while it gets to a point where people may start listening.
Well, that sure would be nice.
It would be unusual. You're right.
We've actually got a couple of questioners, listeners asking, is there any way to make the Democrats listen to their constituents?
That is so good. Yes, it's somewhat disappointing when a Republican doesn't see it the way I see it. We usually, have more agreement. But we've got a lot of Democrats who have promised to be strong on immigration, and they're going to have a chance to stand up and be counted or not. And I think people talking to them can influence them. If you remember in 2007, they tried to move that bill through, and they thought they had all the votes, and President Bush was for it like President Obama, and all the media was for it, and the big business groups were for it, and the Democratic leadership was all for it. But when those phones kept ringing and people really realized something significant was happening outside the Senate chamber, lots of Democrats defected, and that was the key to the defeat of the bill. So you are correct to say. Also, for Democrats who claim to represent working America, it baffles me how they can ignore a strong, almost unanimous economic data that shows this large a flow of immigration can only increase unemployment, pull down wages. And that's what the CBO score even said. It pulls down wages and it increases unemployment, and the GDP per capita, the wealth of increase in wealth per capita of America goes down too per person. So it's just not good for the country, and I'm glad that you're alert to it and pointing that out.
Senator, this is sort of related here. We have several questions, including James, Tom from Georgia, and John from Seattle, who are concerned about the impact of this bill on high-skilled workers because of the massive increases in H-1B visas.
I think that's a matter we need to look at. Professor Matt Loff from University of California, Davis, has written recently in Barron's magazine a very serious article pointing out the impact it's having on college graduates and people with engineering degrees, and how fewer and fewer Americans are going into it, not because they wouldn't want to, but because the wages are, and the future looks grim because of the large flow of foreign workers. So he opposes that. He's written peer-reviewed work. Professor Borjas at Harvard has pointed this out too. Professor Hero has testified before our committee and was very articulate and has produced intense research that shows the same thing. So, yes, I think the country clearly can absorb a higher educated person, and they're more likely to flourish in America than an uneducated, lower skilled worker. But still, there is some question about how much you can accept even of the people with some education.
Senator, we have a question from David in Arizona, who is a retired ICE agent, and he's asking, what happens to the illegal aliens who do not apply for the provisional immigration status, and will any background checks be done in the home countries of these illegal aliens?
The answer is no background check in the home countries, no requirement and no prospect, really, that there will be a face-to-face interview with any of the people who are asking to be given legal status here. And face-to-face interviews clearly can reveal fraud that wouldn't otherwise be revealed. This officer knows a very important thing, and that is that there can never be a lawful system of immigration if we take the position that if you get past the border, you're home free and you're never going to be deported. And that's basically where this administration has placed us today. They simply have blocked ICE from doing their job. They've issued policies and procedures that basically put them in a position of not being able to honor their oath to enforce the laws of the United States. The ICE officers have courageously filed a lawsuit against Janet Napolitano, and they've said she is directing them to violate their oath to faithfully apply the laws of the United States, and that case is still pending in court and going forward. Chris Crane, the leader of the ICE Officers Association, the ICE Union, has been courageous in pointing out the weaknesses of this bill, and he's opposed it consistently, as have the Officers Association for the Citizenship and Immigration Service. They've also opposed it. The former Border Patrol Officers Association have opposed it because they say it won't work, that it's going to weaken law enforcement in many ways. It's going to leave America more vulnerable to terrorists and criminals, and nobody will listen to them. They were not invited to the discussions. They weren't in the secret deals. They weren't with the Gang of Eight. They had La Raza there and the Immigration Lawyers Association there, the Chamber of Commerce and Trumpka and meatpacking companies. But the people who they should be talking to about how to make the law work have been shut out. To me, that's one of the greatest disasters in this bill, and it gives no strength to interior enforcement. It focuses only on the border. But 40% of the people that we have now illegally in our country are visa overstays. And when we're going to double the number of guest worker visas that will be issued when this bill passes, doubling it, you're going to have a much, much larger number of visa overstays, as CBO said. So without a strong ICE association, without strong interior enforcement, all you're doing is surrendering again to illegality.
Senator, we have quite a number of questions that are along the lines of, we have all these great laws on our books right now, and they're not being enforced. So first of all, what is the power that is behind this that is stopping enforcement of the laws? And why can't we just enforce the laws?
Well, that's a good question. I mean that's the $64,000 question. That they won't enforce the laws because they don't want to enforce the laws. They don't want to end immigration. They're not willing illegal immigration. They're not willing to take those steps. I have said this in 2007 when I saw time and time again, if you offer amendments that don't make much difference, you have a chance of seeing them pass. You offer an amendment that will actually make a difference, that's when the objections arise. That's when it almost always fails. So that's why every one of the provisions that are in this bill that pretend to be effective law enforcement provisions have loopholes all through them and are unlikely to ever be effectively carried out. So it's just the people who seem to gravitate to writing these bills and advancing this agenda just have no real interest, frankly, it seems to me, in doing the hard things, but not impossible things, to end the illegality. I would just say this. Many of your listeners have been alert to these things for years, but we could have dramatic further improvement at the border. We can, with very little money, improve workplace enforcement significantly, and for far less money than you heard Senator Schumer and others claim. We can have an entry-exit visa system that clocks people out of the country as well as coming in at land, sea, and air borders. But, for example, this bill on the entry-exit visa system, we do have fingerprints done when people depart from air and sea ports, but there's no identifying them when they leave the country, so you have no record of how many people overstayed. And that's a fundamental weakness. And the current law requires that. Current law requires a biometric fingerprint or equivalent type system in all land, sea, and airports, entry and exit. This bill requires only an electronic system, which is much weaker, at air and seaports and not land. So that leaves you with a system incapable of identifying who has left the country and who has not.
Senator, just as a reminder to all of our listeners, let's just say again, what is the most important thing that they can do to help you stop this bill in the Senate?
I think you should continue to call your senators, and that's very important, and share your views. As I said, the calls have gotten my attention, and they're getting to the level that we had in 2007. And I think other senators have got to be listening to that also. Maybe you would call into your talk shows and talk about it. Maybe speak up and defend your senators if they voted right on the issue or the way you agree. And but be nice. I mean, people, we don't want to have voices on our radios and people talking that evidence dislike are for immigrants. I mean, our problem, the polls show the American people are mad at their politicians a lot more than they are at people who entered the country illegally because we hadn't done anything about it. So I think that, and maybe letters to the editor defending your senators who are trying to do the right thing and expressing your concern about those who don't.
And I think that is very important, and we often take for granted our senators who do the right thing, and it is very important to make sure they know that their constituents approve.
Yeah, don't think we're not getting criticized for these positions. There are a lot of people out there that take shots at us every day.
Yep.
Have been there.
Senator Linda wants to know, she's very concerned about the cost of this legislation. She wants to know if there's any possibility of nullification by the states, but primarily she wants to know your views on the cost.
The cost is remarkable. Senator Schumer said all the cost will be paid for by the fees from those who illegally entered the country, and that was first $6 billion, then it went to $8 billion, and then all of a sudden, when the bill was in big trouble last week, and people saw that their promises were not correct, it wasn't going to work, they came up with this big border amendment that they claimed, and that raises it to $40-something billion. And they claim it's paid for in this way. And all of you need to know this and think about this because it's relevant to Obamacare, it's relevant to this and other issues. The people who are legalized will be given a Social Security card, and they will then have Social Security withheld from them and Medicare withheld from them. So one way you score the analyzed budget cost is count all the money in and all the money out. So you will have an increase to the Treasury, at least to the Social Security and Medicare trust funds, from this new revenue. But it's not revenue to be spent. It's their money that goes to pay for their Social Security and their Medicare that they will draw when they reach retirement age. And since most are fairly young, CBO says more revenue is going to be coming in now than is going out. And so you can't use that money to fund new spending programs and claim you're staying within the budget. I mean, it's just mindless. This is how we're going broke. We double count the money. So the money's coming in, it's guaranteed, it's set aside for Social Security and Medicare, and the people who pay it will get it when they get that age, and it's not available to be spent on the general government programs without increasing the internal debt of the United States. So that's one of the issues that I'm going to continue to press, and probably will do so tomorrow.
Senator Seth from New York has clearly read the CBO evaluation and found that the CBO said that the bill will lower wages and raise unemployment. And he wants to know why Republicans aren't focusing on that and making Democrats stand up and say why they want to lower wages and raise unemployment.
Well, that's a good question. I think I'm the only one that's been on that issue, because I truly believe we live in a real world. We don't live in a visionary world, and a lot of people believe that immigration can only, in the long run, have good benefits. But my view is prudence tells us that a period of high unemployment, when wages have not kept up with inflation since perhaps 1999, in large part, Professor Borjas says, as a result of immigration, that this will exacerbate that problem. And that's what really CBO said. It said that, they say, well, growth in the economy will occur. Yes, this many more people will be giving, instead of 10 million green cards over 10 years, as current law would require if enforced, we will give 30 million green cards over 10 years. Can you imagine that? So these are permanent residents, and so it will, and the guest workers will double over the next 10 years. The result of this can only have adverse consequences to wages and to unemployment. And so I just don't think I think you have to be honest about this. We cannot absorb readily this many people without having adverse impacts, and it falls particularly on the lower income people. They'll be hurt the most, but upper income people will also feel the impact, and middle people, according to CBO, will be a little less. But so this is a real concern, and I expect to talk about it at some length tomorrow or the next day.
Senator, we have quite a number of questions of people who are concerned about the length of the bill and whether or not senators and their staffs have actually read the bill, whether or not these amendments that are being created in backdoor, closed rooms have been read by senators, and how do you debate a bill that nobody really knows what's in it?
Senators haven't read the bill. It's almost unreadable first. Like Obamacare, you sit and read it, and it says, except as provided for in subsection 2(3)(I)(b), and it's all through there. So you have to have my legal staff's working on it. I've tried to read it, but I can't say that I have fully read the bill. I mean, I've read parts of it and key parts of it, and we've done research on it, and so, but most senators have no idea what's in it, frankly. And so this is what modern legislation has come to. A group of people meet, they draft legislation, if it's on a big subject, call it a comprehensive bill. They do polling and figure out what the American people want. They develop a series of talking points that says their bill does what the American people want. And then they go out and promote it. And then who's got time to read the bill and argue with them? So they get out front and they say, most of the talking points they use on this bill I thought were great. But till I read the bill, and it didn't do it. And so Senator Lee talked about that the other night. We had some fun in a colloquy late Thursday night. And they want us to vote on the talking points, not the legislation, but the power The impact is in the words of the legislation.
Well, Senator, we have about 7 minutes left, so I want to remind everybody who's on the call. First of all, the call to action tonight, as you have heard from all of our speakers, is call your senators. The Capitol switchboard number is 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. If you call that number, ask for your senator. They'll connect you directly to your senator's office, and you can give your senator views on this bill. Also, for those of you who still have questions and comments, if you want to stay on after the call, you can get your questions and comments recorded so that we will have them and can try to address them in a later way. And Senator, Can
I interrupt you before I forget?
Absolutely.
I want to thank Senator Grassley. He's the ranking Republican on the Judiciary Committee. He has stood in there, and he's been great with us. Of course, you heard from David Vitter. He was such a key player in the last battle in 2007. He is a smart guy, as you can tell. And then Ted Cruz has just made a huge difference for us. Ted, Mike Lee, who's been super on Judiciary Committee, have been great, and they've sort of been willing to stand out there and battle. John Cornyn proposed an amendment that would have some real teeth in it on the border. They didn't even give him an up or down vote, but tabled it, and he's been very effective in his knowledge of the law. So I guess, I don't know, maybe there's some others out there, but right, slip me. But those are some people that have really invested a lot of time and taken some slings and arrows trying to tell the truth about this legislation.
Well, we certainly appreciate all of your efforts, and we don't envy you having to be up there fighting what seems to be an overwhelming battle, but we are with you 100%. And I think everyone on this call will do everything we can to support you and to help you stop this bill. There's one last question that we have not addressed at all that I'd like to put to you, and that is from Michael in California. Why isn't eliminating birthright citizenship a cornerstone for immigration reform?
You know, that is a matter that deserves far more discussion than it's gotten. You want to know why? Well, fundamentally, why is the people who met and drafted the bill had no interest whatsoever in changing that law. And that's that, and it hasn't been brought up to the floor in any effective way at this point. There's a doubt. A lot of people believe the Constitution is crystal clear that birthright citizenship is in the Constitution, but former Attorney General Ed Meese has pointed out and really made some very good points that indicate that's not so. At least he thinks it's not, and I think he may be right. So, at any rate, it's a odd thing. I think no other country in the world that I know of has that rule.
Senator,
encouraging people to come, of course, and we have people that fly into the United States by the thousands that are simply women who fly here. They come to a good hospital and have somebody have the baby delivered, and the baby is a United States citizen.
Yep. Senator, is there any reason to believe, since this bill puts essentially all the future enforcement decisions in the hands of the Secretary of Homeland Security, is there any reason at all to believe that any of this would actually be implemented?
I absolutely don't believe it will be implemented. For example, the promise of all these new Border Patrol agents, there's no requirement of when it starts. It's supposed to be completed by 2021. And this is just an authorization bill. It authorizes the increase of these officers, but they're not increased unless the appropriations finds the money and spends the money on it. And so what we've seen over the years, they promise these things in the out years, but for one reason or another, the law is modified. That happens a lot. Or the money never shows up. So And the same with the fencing. They claim this Corker-Hoven bill would add 700 miles of fencing, but there's a plain provision that says, notwithstanding that requirement to advance fencing, the Secretary shall not be required to build any fence she doesn't think is advisable. And so basically we're not going to see that get built either, in all likelihood, because she has already said, Secretary Napolitano, she doesn't think we need any more fences. And she basically said the border is under control. So it is really amazing to see the lack of interest in the law enforcement officers and department heads who are supposed to be in making our system work lawfully, that lack of interest in doing the things necessary to make that happen. It's a betrayal of the rule of law in America, really.
Senator, I think we are wrapping up here. I just want to say on behalf of everyone listening how pleased we are, first of all, that you took the time to join us, and second, that we have such a wonderful hero in the Senate leading this fight and spending hours and hours on the Senate floor talking about all these issues and really standing for American workers and American taxpayers. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up?
Well, just thank you, and we're going to give it every effort we have. I think it's possible as these voices are heard and as our members see that the promises made by the sponsors of the bill are filled with more holes than Swiss cheese, that votes could erode in the Senate. Secondly, if it limps out of the Senate, and I'm hoping that's all we'll see happen, then we need to focus our attention on the House and try to encourage them to produce a bill that we can be proud of, that will end the illegality, that will serve the national interest, and create an immigration system that enhances jobs, wages, and prosperity, not adversely impacts our jobs, wages, and prosperity. So thank you for what you do, and I'm pleased to share some thoughts with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Senator Sessions. And thank you to all of our listeners who have spent an hour with us now. If you still have comments and questions, please stay on the line, and we will put you in a queue to get those questions asked or leave the comments. And thank you for everything you're doing, and good night.